This video will discuss variables and constructs. So with this video, we begin discussing the third step in the research process, and that is determining a method for defining and measuring the variables that are going to be studied in your research or in your experiment. So first we need to discuss what a variable is. And we briefly mentioned this in other videos, but now we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So variables, what we've said before, is it's something that has different values for different individuals. So it's a characteristic or condition that may change depending on the individual that you're observing. So there are some variables that are well defined. They're easily observed. They're easily measured. And there's other variables that are harder to figure out how to measure. They're intangible. They have abstract qualities to them. And we're going to go into these in a little bit more detail. So some examples of these well-defined, easily observed, and easily measured variables, something like height, weight, blood pressure. You use a ruler, you measure somebody, right? They step on a scale and you measure their weight or another object's weight. We have a device that can measure blood pressure. There's nothing arbitrary or abstract about that. It's concrete. Another example would be, again, Elizabeth Loftus and her experiment looking at question wording, and how that changed the speed. So again, she showed them a video of cars getting in an accident, then asked them a series of questions, the important question being about how fast were the cars going when they blanked into each other. And then she used a variety of different words: hit, crash, smash, collided, contacted. So it was very clear cut. What she was varying was the wording of the question, and then what she was measuring was the speed that they reported. So it's a very clear cut, well defined, and easily observed variable. The next type of variable is intangible, abstract, as we said before. It's going to be things like motivation, self-esteem, anxiety, trust. We don't have a tool to measure those, right? So measurement's going to be a little bit more complicated. We have to come up with a very precise definition of what we mean by motivation or self-esteem or trust. And that's going to be called an operational definition that we'll discuss in a subsequent video. So I'm just going to give you an example here of the construct of trust. And so hopefully to help you understand what that construct is. And then we'll talk more about how we would define a construct. So there's a game called the trust game, and what they're trying to do is measure this construct of trust with this game. And so what they do is they give people who've participated in an experiment that they thought was the true experiment, but really what they're looking at is their response here, and they give them a reward for participating, like some money, say $10. They're told that they can transfer that money to another participant, and that money will triple, and then that participant has the opportunity to transfer some money back. So when participant 1 is transferring money to participant 2, the amount that they transfer it determines how much trust they have. And when participant 2 receives that money, the more money they get, the more trustworthy they feel. So this is one way to define a complicated variable that you might want to measure, such as trust. Can you increase or decrease trust? What does trust result from? So what are constructs? So constructs are hypothetical. They're created from theories or speculation. And so if they're created from theory or speculation, I guess we need to talk about what is a theory. So a theory is basically, it allows for predictions of behavior. It's based off a large set of observations, right? And from those observations, we make a set of statements. And sometimes we misuse this idea of theory in our everyday language. Like, for example, I might say, oh, I have a theory of why so-and-so is not talking to me so much. But in psychology, the theory is really going to be something that's, again, this state of observation, a statement that organizes observations that have been made. And these observations are about specific relationships between variables. They propose an underlying behavior, allow us to predict behavior. So here are some examples of things you might be familiar with. Maybe you learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or Skinner and operational conditioning, behaviorism with Pavlov's dogs, or the lifespan perspective of development. So all of these are theories that are based off of a set of observations and allow for predictions of behaviors. And so those theories contribute to our constructs that we develop. So constructs, these hypothetical constructs, again, we said is created from theory and speculation, and they're intangible, right? It's something that we can't see, we can't touch it, so we assume that it exists. So here's it's going to be used to explain and predict behavior in a theory. So here's just an example of this idea. So our construct is here. It's kind of like, although it's a blue box here, it's kind of like a black box, right? Something that we can't actually see or touch. So what we can do is create an external stimulus, assume that it's going to affect that construct, and then we can measure this external behavior. So in that example that I gave for the trust game, our external stimulus was, so an example we've used previously in class, that trust game was played after they gave a little sniff of oxytocin, right? So they wanted to measure and see if oxytocin would increase the level of trust. And so in this experiment, the external stimulus was the oxytocin sniff. They're trying to measure trust. They want to see if that oxytocin will increase trust. And what they measure is how much money participant 1 gave to participant 2. So again, we have an external stimulus. We predict it's going to affect trust, and we measure that behavior externally.